Yep, this is an actual Porsche Speedster. Now this car is even more special. It's a pre-A Speedster too. So this is a 1955. Really interesting car. So it's a friend of ours and he brought it by. He'd like me to do a little bit of just sort of general maintenance and tune-up on it. I really don't know, once again, what I'm getting into with this car, but we're going to start with kind of the basics. We'll do just basic tune-up. We'll do valves, electrical, tune the carburetors, that sort of thing, get everything all balanced, maybe an oil change, that sort of stuff. We'll drive the car and see where we are with it. But wow, this is an incredible opportunity. I'm super stoked to do this car. A quick tour of the engine bay here. Now this engine is not the correct engine for the car actually. It's actually a much later engine, probably 1960. Normal, it looks like a B engine. So that's fine, we just need to know enough about it so we can set valves and do all that sort of stuff and get the timing correct on the engine. I know the owner does have an original 55 engine for the car. He just has it in his garage and chooses to run this engine instead, which is pretty safe because those original engines are worth a lot of money. In order to start the valves, we need to set the engine to top dead center for cylinder number 1. If you're looking for an actual how-to on step by step on doing a tune-up on a 356, I'll link that video up above here so you can go ahead and check that out. I'm just going to kind of run through the process. It's not really that complicated. We basically set the engine up top dead center number 1, and then we go backwards through the rotation of the engine actually, and that allows us to go 1, 2, 3, 4. So cylinders really quick like a bunny. Number 1 forward on the right, rear is number 2 on the left side of the car, forward is 3 and rear is 4. So we're going to pull our distributor cap, we're going to rotate our engine, get ourselves set to cylinder number 1, then we're going to climb under, pop that rocker cover off on the rocker cover, the valve cover off on the right side, and we'll go ahead and get into the valves and start adjusting them. 0.004 on the intake, 0.006 on the exhaust. This is a standard normal B engine in this car. So 1960 engine. If it was funny, if it was a Super 90 from kind of the same era, it would actually be reversed. But this is a normal engine and not a Super 90, so standard 356E valve clearances apply. So all right, let's go ahead and pop off that distributor cap and get started. This is pretty sweet. We've got a vintage distributor cap on this thing. Look how dark that is. It's really cool. So it's the original Bosch distributor cap. Very cool. We're going to pop these guys off, see what we got inside here. Oh, look at that. We've even got a vintage rotor as well. How cool is that? Check our mechanism. Sounds pretty good. Now we need top dead center for cylinder number 1. There's a notch over here, but we want to also verify that when this thing is on and set properly, oops, we're getting stuck there. There we go. On here like this, that this is indeed cylinder number 1. So we can just trace that back, trace our wire all the way back here to this one, and sure enough, it's going to cylinder number 1. That's great. So we know that our notch is going to line up with cylinder number 1, so let's see if we can get this guy out of the way. And we'll just rotate our engine. There's a big old honking 36mm nut. Hold the fan belt together a bit to get some traction. And around we go. Okay, so we're coming up on our notch. Now, one important distinction when you're doing this sort of thing is to realize that the notch on the distributor, when it's lined up, when you got the rotor lined up with the notch, is not necessarily top dead center. If if you've got any advancement at all in your distributor, it's going to be off by that amount of advancement. So you always verify actual top dead center by the notches in the pulley. It's kind of important, kind of a weird distinction. It's not super duper critical, but we want to make sure that the piston's all the way up when we're adjusting the valve, so that there's no tension in the valve train at all for that particular cylinder. All right, so as we're coming up, we see our notch coming up here. So the notch we're looking to line up is this notch here on the pulley up against this slot that's right here on the generator tower. So we're all lined up here. We are at cylinder number 1, according to our distributor there, and top dead center, according to our pulley. With the valve cover off, I got started on cylinder number 1. Now I did find that, that the valves were a little bit tight for cylinder number 1 there, so not the end of the world, just went ahead and loosened them up. Then of course we rotate backwards 180 degrees to get to cylinder number 2. And I found that for cylinder number 2, they were also a little bit tight. So I went in and loosened them up a little bit and adjusted them. Then we rotate the engine counterclockwise 180 degrees again to set up for cylinder number 3. I found number 3 to be actually a little bit loose. With cylinder number 3 all done, I went ahead and rotated one more time 180 degrees counterclockwise to set up for cylinder number 4 and found it a little bit loose as well. With our valves all done, next step is going to be to get into the timing a little bit. First thing I want to do is pull the distributor out. It's just so much easier to pull the distributor out of the car, work on it on the bench, and put it back in. We're going to check the point gap, make sure the points are good. I don't think they've got many miles on them at all, so they're probably okay. We just want to double check the gap. And then we're going to throw it back in and we'll retime the engine just to verify that the timing's where it should be. Start by removing the wire up to the coil. Now there's a little teeny nut and some washers there, so be careful not to lose those. From there, it's a simple matter to remove the 13mm nut that's holding in the distributor's timing plate. Once that's out, the distributor will you can just pull it straight out and you're all set. So first we're just going to do a bit of a visual inspection here. There's oil around the base of the distributor. That's a good thing. We want to make sure that this thing is getting lubricated from the engine, which is a great thing. So oil there is a good thing. All right, and it's just a little bit, there's just a little bit of dirt. We're just going to kind of clean it a little bit, double check the points. I'm not going to be replacing the condenser because it's a known good part, and they have a nasty tendency, these things, to the new ones, to be jeepers. They're terrible. Half of them or more are bad. So if your condenser's working, don't swap it out. So that's a thing. All right. Well, not much to that. We just basically double checked everything is okay and double checked our gap and the condition of the points. Like I said, this distributor's been serviced recently, so I'm not going to spend a bunch of time going through the whole thing. It's actually fine. Even the points, they're like no pitting at all in the points, so it obviously hasn't, I don't think the car gets run that much. I just wanted to validate and verify the actual point setting and make sure we got a little bit of grease in the places that needed it, and that's it. So, okay, back into the car, and we'll go ahead and set the static timing. With our distributor back in, our next step is going to be to just double check our timing. It should be 5 degrees before top dead center. We can statically time these cars pretty well because these distributors are really solid on these cars. They're pretty awesome. Now we're all set. We got everything all hooked up. Next step is to turn on the ignition to the ignition position so that it's on, so that we've got power back here. Now it's important, super duper important, that if you're ever fussing around back here with the ignition on and you're rotating the engine, you must have the distributor cap off. Because if you don't, the car's live, primed, ready to go, and it could actually start as you're cranking the engine over. Manually, that would be super scary and just totally bad. So Always have the distributor cap off, 0 chance it's going to start, and we don't need it on anyway. So, okay, so let me go ahead and turn the ignition on and we'll check our timing. And we'll roll up here to top dead center. There it is. So, back up just a tad, just to verify. Okay, it's off. All right, so here we go. We're gonna come up here close to top dead center and wait for our meter to come up. There it is. Click. And this notch here, this is our top dead center here, this white one. And this little notch back here is 5 degrees before top dead center. So we're just a smidgen ahead, but not by much. Just a little bit. So that's probably fine. Nothing to really worry about with that. We'll back it off. Try again. The meter went back down. Come forward. There we go. Click. So we're very, very close. With our timing good and our distributor all set, we're just going to take a look at the inside here of the distributor cap. It looks pretty good. I mean, I see it, the lightest bit of wear. It's clean inside. It looks great. Really nothing wrong there. We'll go ahead and put our distributor cap back on. Make sure it's indexed properly and put our tabs back on. There we go. Okay. With the valves done and our timing all set, since the car is still stone cold, I think the next thing I want to do is pull all 4 of the spark plugs, go ahead and clean them and put them back in. I want to take a look and see if there's any craziness in one of the cylinders at this point. Just want to be certain that we've got some pre-existing condition that I need to worry about. So let me go ahead and pull all 4 of them out. I'll just clean them and throw them back in. No big deal. Kind of the same old as always with this. These are our spark plugs, number 1, 2, 3, and 4. So 1, 2, and 4 look pretty good, but look at number 3. That's a little schmutzy there, huh? A little bit dark and schmutzy. So that tells me that number 3 is running extremely rich for some reason. That's a little weird, huh? So let's just go ahead and clean all our spark plugs and go ahead and put them back in, and we'll move on from there. With the plugs all nice and clean, I've got a little anti-seize. I'll go ahead and hit the threads just with a kiss and reinsert all the spark plugs. Well, that was actually pretty straightforward. Spark plugs came out, cleaned them, put them right back in, no fusses. That's always nice. A lot of cars, there's maybe like one cylinder where it's fussy to get in. You have to go back and forth and back and forth. Trick with spark plugs, of course, is to put them in by hand, tight first. I've been using this little guy a lot. It's really great. You can just, it rotates like this, the head on it and everything, and it ratchets really well. The other thing is that you just cannot put much torque on with something like this, which is great. Makes it a little bit difficult to get them off because they're always a little tight, so you can maybe put a bigger wrench on to get them off. But to put them on, I put this guy on, and I can even use it as sort of a nut drivery guy, or when you get to the end, you can kind of swivel around. Works awesome. You just put a little extension on it and works perfectly. Totally digging this little guy. At this point, we've taken a bunch of stuff off and put some stuff back on. We adjusted the valves, we did our timing, we checked our distributor, we pulled our plugs out. Probably a good idea to start the car at this point just to establish a baseline, make sure the car runs. Because our next step is going to be to fiddle with these carburetors. And I really don't want multiple things stacked up. I want to be able to go back and put a stake in the sand and say, yep, it ran before I dealt with the carburetors, so if it's not running afterwards, it's definitely the carburetors. So let's go ahead and just start it real quick like a bunny. No big deal. We're just going to start it. We're not really even going to bother warming it up. Just make sure that it runs. Speedsters are pretty cool. They have a push button start on them, so a lot like that Spider was. with our clutch in, turn the ignition on, make sure we're in neutral, and give it a couple of pumps down here on the accelerator pedal just to give it a little bit of fuel, and here we go. Boy, the transmission. I don't know if you can hear that. That's with the clutch out. In, out. Boy, it's a little grumbly. So the big question here is, how does it sound? Does it sound smooth? For the most part. I mean, it's stone cold, of course. Doesn't sound too bad. It's not completely smooth, though. I think we can work on that. That gives us a great baseline right there. I think at this point I'm going to call an end to the very first vlog of the Speedster here. It's been a lot of fun. It actually has gone really well. Let's recap a little bit. On the right side we had loose valves. On the left side our valves were, almost all of them were too tight. So all the valves have been sorted. That's awesome. So that sounds great. And we know our timing is good. We know that our distributor, that the gap is set properly, our spark plugs are nice and clean, and the engine is running and idling at this point. So I think it's a great place to stop. Next time we're going to be delving into these carburetors because they are kind of a mess. They're leaking, they're dirty, and remember cylinder number 3 was kind of a mess. So that's what's going to be up for next time. So I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, please give it a thumbs up. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and leave them down below and I'll get right to them. We're going to have several in this series of this car. So we're going to go through a bunch of stuff with it. It's going to be great fun. So please stay tuned for all the episodes for the Speedster. And thank you so much for watching. Until next time, safe travels. Bye.